Welcome back to the AME Food Safety Show. As you have heard, that song, Fantasy, by Earth, Wind & Fire. I love that song because we live in a fantasy world. We have something presented to us, being healthy, fresh, wonderful for us to eat, but the underlying proposition is that it's not. They're just trying to get our money. What I'm going to tell you about right now are some recent food outbreaks that will astound you. Has anybody ever heard, take an apple a day, eat an apple a day, you keep the doctor away? That could be true. If that apple was not contaminated with listeria. We just had that incident. I'm going to read off an article. In December of 2014, 32 people were infected with listeria. The resulting disease is called listeriosis. The challenge is 7 deaths were as a result of eating directly those apples. Apples are a challenge. I'll tell you why. They're stored for over a year. They primarily come from Washington. They can come from many states, but they're primarily from Washington. The challenge with apples produced here in the central San Joaquin Valley, actually in the Bakersfield area, is that the contact surfaces in that facility were contaminated with listeria that was not properly maintained. I talked about it earlier. It happens primarily because the owners, the managers, are not focusing on looking and hunting for that particular listeria bacteria in their plant. They slacked off. The fact that you have dead bodies is prima facie evidence that they didn't care about their consumers. A lot of these apples were used in other than direct consumption. Many were made into candied apples. So there was an alert. Hopefully you know about them. You've destroyed all the candy apples in your facility, in your home. But the issue is it's in 11 states. Let's look at those. Arizona, California, Minnesota. It's not a joke, people. Missouri, New Mexico, North Carolina, Texas, Utah, Washington, and Wisconsin. 2 cases have the exact same DNA that was found on that food processing plant in Bakersfield that was in those victims' stomachs. What does that tell you? It's an uncontrovertible case. If those victims find a lawyer, there's money waiting for them to recover the loss. What's the challenge for us? Listeria monocytogenes can harm even healthy people, make them sick, protect, and even kill them. We've had about 2,500 cases, according to the FDA, of listeriosis, and about 260 deaths annually. And you might think, well, hey, Andy, that's never going to happen to me. Let me tell you something that does happen to you. Toddler snacks. I see a lot of toddlers that are overweight. They're monsters. What do I see that goes right along with that condition, the health condition of that child? They eat a lot of salt and a lot of sugar. Here's a study that was recently held by the CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control, and it showed that they found total sugar and salt in more than 1,000 U.S. infant and toddler foods in major stores in 2012 had overdoses, and I use that term very consciously, of sugar and salt. 657 infant foods included dinners, vegetables, fruits, dry cereals, and ready-to-serve mixed grains have an overdose of sugar and salt. So what does that mean to you? I know a lot of people are busy. They want to kind of get the meal over with. So they go out and buy a prepared meal. Look very carefully at what's in that prepared meal to induce you to eat high fructose corn syrup, salt, sugar. What is the most sold product in a movie theater? And I go to a lot of movies. Salt, peanuts, popcorn, high fructose corn syrup, soda, to give you that temporary high before you get out while you're watching the film. A poor diet in childhood can lay a foundation for future health problems such as obesity, heard that before? Cardiovascular disease. And it's important to try to instill healthy early eating habits according to this director at the CDC. What does he know? Let's talk about food poisoning. Look it up on the internet. Food poisoning, foodborne illnesses, foodborne bacteria, and it will astound you. Has anybody within the sound of my voice eaten sprouts? I had some the other day. I have clients that literally walked me off their facility. They grow sprouts for major companies. When you go into Jamba Juice, you're going to see essentially a lawn growing in a pallet. And they take a pair of scissors, cut that off, put it into a juice for people, which is great. The challenge is a lot of those green grasses, the munga beans and the sprouts, they're not tested. They're not treated for bacteria such as E. coli. If you have a weak digestive system, you're under loaded down with pharmaceuticals from some medical condition, you eat those sprouts, you have a risk for becoming food poisoned. It's not a joke, people. Here's what happens. I've been into about 12 of these food-producing facilities where they grow these sprouts. To be honest with you, they're horrible places. They use hose water. They're right on the dirt. Very unsanitary conditions. In fact, I'm going to have a show on public restrooms and your restroom and how you can improve your health. But what I'd like to talk about in the next couple minutes is how the United States industry of growing beans is so different from other places like Europe. As a matter of fact, many countries won't take green sprouts from the United States because of our lack as an industry of taking care of these green sprouts. If you've ever been ill after eating, and they put them on healthy food stores, I can't figure that out, green sprouts, review what happened to you and where those sprouts came from, and you will track it back to a grower that's growing under these conditions. What I'd like to talk about now, we can open this next slide, is about food poisoning. I call it foodborne illness because it came from food, didn't come from the air, didn't come from the sky. What are the conditions? Let's begin. Slide 1. Nausea. What's nausea? You don't feel well. You know when you feel well. You obviously are going to know when you don't feel well. Fever. What's fever? You have a rising temperature. Most people will take the temperature. You know what you feel like normally. It'll be elevated. Vomiting. That's a pretty good sign something's wrong. And what the type of vomiting we're looking at is called ejection vomiting, where you don't control it. If you've ever had an ejection vomiting session, you know when it's coming, A, or B, you don't know when it's coming. You could be talking to somebody normally, and they vomit, ejection vomit right in your face. That's a challenge. Get away from that. Clean yourself immediately. Abdominal pain. You'll feel like somebody punched you in the stomach. It's not pleasant. And diarrhea. So it's conceivable that you could be on the toilet and have a bucket in your face, receiving both at the same time. That's your body responding to the organisms. A lot of people say, hey, I ate today and I think I'm foodborne illness. That's unlikely. It usually takes a few days for those organisms to grow inside your stomach. And then you have several areas in your stomach, pre-digestion. It's usually going to be in the lower digestion for those organisms to build enough volume. There are some that are called endotoxin, and there is toxic. Some that produce their waste goes into your system, that'll kill you. Others you break apart in your stomach with your acids, and that will harm you, and it will begin this foodborne illness session for you. Let's read it. Foodborne illness is any illness resulting from the consumption of contaminated food. Pathogenic bacteria, I focus a lot on that because I look for it. Viruses, parasites. The number one way you're going to get parasites is if you consume water from someplace you don't know it's safe. I have a session later in my series on water. Contaminated food includes a lot of times chemicals. We use a lot of chemicals. If you live in the San Joaquin Valley, you see helicopters, you see airplanes, you see tractors hauling around chemicals. And there are also natural toxins that may be particular to you. How about a poisonous mushroom? All of these things can make you sick. Remember, headache, fever, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea. Next slide. What is this? This is from the CDC and the FDA. It gives a list, and you might not be able to read it, but I'll explain it to you. Diarrhea. You get that a lot from meats. And this all sounds familiar, right? How about rice products? How about raw chicken? And has anybody ever gone to a family picnic, Cooked up a chicken, you don't really know what you're doing. Inside is still raw. Serve it anyway, and you're sick. Guess what? It's probably salmonella. Improperly canned or fermented foods. Aunt Betsy gives you something she canned. Be very wary of it, particularly if the top is popped or if it looks discolored. How about meat, products, gravy? Somebody produces a gravy, you're not really sure about their cleanliness or sanitation. Raw meat, raw fish, raw products of any kind. That's why cavemen cooked their food. Let's talk for a minute about oysters, clams. That can be contaminated. Those organisms live in the ocean. And guess what? The ocean, everybody thinks, it's going to die in the salt water. It's the ocean. No. The pH of salt water in the ocean is identical to human blood. Let me tell you a story, and it's true. I was working for Cepheid. The city and county of Honolulu contracted us to do a test or survey of Honolulu Beach for a pathogen called methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. Some people call it MRSA. Some people call it MRSA. Well, guess what? You have millions of people bathing in that beach every day from all over the world. MRSA lives on the skin of humans. So you could have somebody swimming next to you from Hong Kong, Lebanon, Brazil, Japan. So you go out there from Wisconsin, you jump in that water, next thing you know, have a cut that's not healing. Next thing you know, you're in the hospital. And next thing you know, you're at your funeral. The challenge is that the waters in some parts of Hawaii, I won't disclose where, are contaminated with MRSA because of that situation. And the pH of seawater is the same as human blood. Go to the pool. Staphylococcus aureus, same thing. It's a MRSA in its previous version. It's in every hospital, by the way. That's why they have those hand sanitizers. Let me tell you something about those hand sanitizers in hospitals. It takes 5 minutes for those alcohol-based sanitizers to start killing the bugs. If you just rub it on and you start touching doorknobs, you're not doing anything. We can talk about other foods, oysters. Raw milk is a particularly sore subject with me. Some people say, we're going to go back to be like the pioneers. We're not going to pasteurize our milk like we learned in the 1800s. We're just going to drink it raw. Read the newspaper. Type in raw milk illness in Google. See if I'm lying to you. Next slide. Let's talk about symptoms for a minute. You might have eaten a jalapeno chili and had the symptoms of having nausea and you vomited. That's one thing. But if you eat something, and it's hard to remember if I asked anybody in this room, what'd you eat 2 days ago? Yeah, it'd be a quiz for them to remember. Remember the symptoms. Nausea, vomiting, watery diarrhea. Everybody knows how their waste comes out of their body. If it's unusual in any way, if you see blood in that diarrhea, you have challenges. You need to immediately start taking care of it. A fever. You see that picture of the lady on the right? She's worshiping at the throne, all right? So we call it. Next slide. All right, guys. Here's the bottom line from me to you. I'm paying for this. I want you to know. And I changed from my profession of being a DNA analysis for hospital-based or healthcare-based pathogens to food for a reason. Everybody has to eat. More people get sick from eating than anything else. Avoid food poisoning. The first thing you need to do, prepare your food properly. Don't help cross-contamination. Cook the food properly and store it properly. Look at your refrigerator. Make sure it's hitting temperature. Not only use that little dial in the refrigerator, get yourself an independent thermometer. This is my message to you today. Look out for food poisoning. My other message to you is the following. What do they look like? I showed you that. Food bacteria through an electron microscope. Become a food safety activist. Do something. Don't just sit there, throw it out the trash. High fructose corn syrup, it's poison. Yes, it makes you eat, but if you look like that person, those people that I showed in that picture, change your ways, buddy. The clock is ticking. Foodborne illness. Know when it happens to you or anyone around you. Let me conclude today's remarks by saying the following. There are conspiracies in food. I know you're shocked. Not every food producer cares about you as much as making money. They want to make money, primarily. Their family's been doing it. They don't really care about food safety. And if you're talking to them in person, yeah, we care about it. Look in their budget. And they say, Andy, we can increase to have you come in and analyze our food company, our food factory, because it's going to cost us some money. And by the way, I'm building a new house. Hey, you want to go for a boat ride in my new boat? I look at them and I'm shocked. So what I'm saying to you as a consumer, become active in your own health. I'm going to conclude by saying, God bless you, but keep your eyes wide open all the time and keep a close watch on this body of yours because you're not getting a replacement. Thank you very much. I look forward to the next session.